Okay, I think we're recording. All right. So again, welcome. Happy Tuesday. I think now that I'm my schedule's changed a little bit, I get confused. I'm like, is it Monday? Is it Thursday? Happy Tuesday. So at least we're getting this week started. We're rolling into it. We're gonna do our critique. So we have our first homework assignments to check out. So we will talk quickly about critique, like how critique works. And then of course we'll get into it. And then we'll have some time that, as I put in the chat, we'll actually do a little master study, which we do this pretty often in critiques or for an assignment, which is we look at a piece of artwork from another artist. Master study, of course, is the classical kind of term. These people don't have to be like true masters of their field, but they're definitely professionals. Basically, everyone that I stick up on the screen would be someone who's a working professional. And so we'll check out some of this work and we'll kind of see some differences and some similarities with work that we did this week, so we can learn a little bit more about painting eyes. Yeah, it's funny because I see your chat. I was thinking about this artist, and then I saw your homework, and that made me think even more about it. I was like, oh, I bet you look at this guy because your stuff like kind of had that same vibe. So yeah, I'll look forward to talking about that in the critique. So critique, master study, and then of course, as always, we'll try to duck out about 5 minutes before the end of class so you can be on your merry way. Just a quick little idea about rules for receiving critique. So, I mean, like to actually get critiqued in class. So we do want to start with a really good standard in this class and maintain it. That you get a critique like this where you get your work drawn over only if you submit it on time. And that's also related to like submitting it right before class. So in the past, people will be like clicking the button like right before class. People are like trying to give it to me on Teams. I'm trying to like copy paste it in the middle of class. I'm not doing that anymore. Like if you submit it on time, you're the ones that deserve the draw over. If you don't submit it on time, you'll still get grading. It'll just be only through altitude, so you won't have a draw over. That said, if you submit work late, especially if you continually submit late, you're definitely going to see it popping up on your grading. So like on what's called effort or adhering to prompts, you would have some dock points on that. And then as a reminder, especially in these first few classes, if you don't have your camera on, you're kind of absent. If you get a lot of absences, you're going to have some demons with passing the class. So make sure you got those cameras on, especially for critique day. A lot of you have had some class with me, which is awesome. If you haven't before, in terms of what a critique is. Critiques where, of course, we're going to check out the homework. We get to draw on top of it and give you some additional advice. Critique is technically between myself and whoever's work we're looking at. But I do really encourage you guys to type feedback that's positive in the chat. What we mean by positive feedback is we want you to say things like, wow, like I really like this certain eye that you painted, or oh, your color choice is really cool, or wow, I like the style. We love stuff like that as a class. You should definitely type that when we're seeing work on the screen. In terms of constructive feedback, like where you're saying like, I don't really like that piece of artwork, or I think you could have done a little bit better. We actually don't want to hear that from anyone right now. We're going to teach you a little bit about how that would work, especially from seeing critique happen. We'll learn how to be more constructive. So if you have positive feedback, please type it in the chat when you see artwork on the screen. And then when we do the little master study later, we're actually going to go around and ask everyone some thoughts on like, what do we think of this work? What are some things we're thinking about with it? What can we learn from it? So we'll get some talking in as well. If you haven't done critique before, besides drawing on top of your work, the main questions would just be, what did you find kind of challenging? Like what was sort of a challenging part of the homework? And then of course, like, what are you interested in improving on? So as much as we celebrate the work, we're happy that you did the assignment. We're also like really stressing, hey, what do we do in the next stages of this? Like, how do we keep pushing it? And then I do have a notoriety for doing pretty deep critique, and I don't want to go overtime, and I want to make sure everyone has a fair amount of time. So I will be really cutting myself off like about 3 to 4 minutes into a critique of someone's work. So if you have more questions, or if you're like, hey, like, could you show me a little bit more on my piece? Just message me on Teams. And I'd like to say I have a pretty good track record of responding on Teams. I mean, if you send me some artwork, I'll try to draw over it, give you some notes back. So that said, let's jump into our critique. Here is our little wall of fame, as I like to refer to, of people who submit on time. So congratulations. I want to say that the work that was submitted, I was extremely impressed with. I mean, like, I feel great about this work. This is the exact kind of start I want to see to this class. And for those of you that submitted work, definitely keep this up. Keep up the presentation, keep up the quality. Again, I really like what I see here, and I'm excited to check out this work together. So in no particular order, kind of start from here in the first one. Let's begin our critique with Benson's work. This was actually the first piece because of Benson's name alphabetically. This was the first piece I saw. And right away, again, I was like, I really dig this. This is cool stuff. Lots of good reference as well. I don't think I know this game very well. I think it's called Splatoon or something, right? I don't know it very well, but I like the style in it a lot. And so I'm glad that you referenced that one. You even got in a pair of eyes. And before I get Benson to chat a little bit about this, what I really like too is that this is great presentation. It's like you showed me all the artwork. You still showed me the layers, which is a very important part of the homework, is to show your layers. You even showed me some sketches and things. And so I gotta be honest, like we have that grading system of like presentation, 1 through 4. This is like, 4+. Like if you keep doing this, I would love that for the rest of the term. And I think we should look at this as an example at students for how to present. So Benson, let's hear a little bit about those questions. What did you find kind of challenging in the homework, or even like a good question for you, because these look pretty nice, is what did you try to challenge yourself with on the homework?
Oh, my mic works. Well, I don't know. I think what was really challenging was to just like what to draw, because I was just kind of thinking and I was like, wow, I have no idea what I want to draw for these. I don't know.
And how'd you settle on like this kind of work? Like I see this platoon one, like are these other ones from reference, or are they just a little bit more made up?
Um, they are not, the other two aren't from reference. I think I tried to draw, I think the first one I tried to draw something, but I didn't have a reference, and so it just kind of morphed into its own thing. Same with the second one. I was trying to redraw like a She-Ra screenshot or something on
Mm-hmm.
number two, and it
Mm-hmm.
very clearly evolved from that
Yeah.
because that's not She-Ra very clearly.
Yeah, one more quick question is, do you have like, I think I could see this, do you have kind of like a little bit of lighter color here versus over here? Like, do you have kind of like a gradient a little bit?
I do, yes.
Yeah, I think that's very appealing. That's a really like, that's one of those subtle kind of attractive moves in color to kind of put like a little bit of gradient, and I really like that. Kind of like one by one, like I really like this nice like cut. Like you kind of did that good little geometry in there to kind of like play with this style that's really sharp. Then we come over here, and again, I like this one a lot too. I think it's very playful in terms of like how you did the coloring of the line art. Like this isn't, black, or this isn't black on here. And then use like the right kind of brush, like with like a little bit of tooth or grain on it. And then yeah, again, this is a very nice move where you have the little bit of like gradient, which I want to point out because you're making some nice work. Something that's cool about that gradient, I keep saying that word by the way for everyone. Gradient just means a very smooth transition of color. So if we had like, this light brown and it got like a little bit darker, I'll make this show up a little more on Zoom. If it got like a little bit darker, this is what we call a gradient. Now, a cool thing is for you, Benson, to think about is that was a nice move for appeal. I mean, like it's just appealing looking. And then what I also like about it is this is technically like the heavier weight of the eye would be like the eyelash and like all that line work. And then this side's kind of like the lighter weight visually, right? Where it's sort of breaking a little bit. I mean, like you put a break in there. It's like the tear duct and stuff that's more delicate. So that's also very wise to like put heavier color and weight like on the heavier side visually of the eye. Um, yeah, I mean, honestly, this is a really, really nice assignment. I can already tell if you keep up this work that you'll be receiving what I call my pro nitpick, which means I kind of like really tinker with like these or give you like some small suggestions, which I will right now. And I think I said this to Zaya or someone last time, maybe it was even yesterday's critique. That's like the most flattering critique I would say, is if I get in there and I start kind of like just needling you on small things, that means it's really great work. Now I'm telling you like what would you do if this was like in a studio, it's great. I mean, this is such a nice piece to start off with. I think overall, again, the number one I think is really, really strong. I like it a lot. I'm going to give you very like nitpicky stuff that's cool. You'll hear this a lot when we're doing this kind of work over the term. I talk a lot about like matching stuff and like how it's always good to have like a touch of like unevenness or asymmetry. So this is a really strong eye. If I had to give it like even one tiny note, I think it'd be just to like stick this a little bit farther out so it's getting away from the size or real estate of that eyelid. So again, very minor critique. Um, really like this Splatoon one, especially I like your translation of 3D to 2D. You kind of took like the 3D models and then you imagined like what would it look like when it's really graphic. Um, yeah, I think this one again, like I also don't want to like make things up. I don't want to make up critique. This one's like really strong. Barely, I would say like maybe watch that. Like watch that highlight kind of being like almost like a tangent with the line work itself. If you imagine like the way the light's hitting the eyes, it's okay for it to kind of be in the same spot. So I mean like you could on this eye over here, if it's like kind of 3/4, you could stick like right there and that'd be okay. It's also okay if you want to make it like a touch smaller if you're worried about like covering stuff up. But yeah, I'd watch it being like right on the edge there. And then with this the Shira one, I'm liking a lot of it. I think if I was like your art director, which of course I am in a way as your instructor, this would be like the only decision that I would like rethink, where you kind of have that little bit of like stringing or like kind of like striping with that gray. Because everything is so bold, like big bold shapes. I like your thought where you're trying to do something like a little bit different, but it kind of feels like it's just a touch like outside of the style of what you did on like the rest of the eye. So my tiny critique would be I just keep that as a nice flat for the shadow up there on the eye. But yeah, please keep up this quality of work. This is some slam dunk stuff. And I like your variety too. The video games, some stuff from animation, things like that. I think it's really good. Do you have any quick questions, Benson, besides all that kind of stuff? Do you have any questions about it?
No, no.
Okay, very good. Keep it up. I love it. All right. So we have August next. Very nice work. By the way, thanks everyone for typing in the chat a little bit, and that's nice to put some feedback in there, some positive stuff. Yeah, another assignment I opened up and I said, oh man, I really like this stuff. I like all three of them. In particular, I really like the third one. I do really like the second one too. I think the second one, in my opinion, is like it translates very well to something I'd see in like animation or comic. The design and like how it's executed. Yeah, really great stuff. So August, let's hear from you real fast about this work. What were some kind of like Benson, because you did a really nice assignment, like what were you challenging yourself with? Like what were you trying to pull off? I think August typing in the chat. I'll check. Small, yeah, it's a like I like Zai's comment. Small black iris with tired eye. Yeah, I'll give August just a second to type. While August is typing, give me a second. My computer is trying to restart, and I don't want that right now. Give me a second. Yeah, tomorrow. Sure. Okay. August says non-realistic eyes can be difficult, so I was practicing doing eyes in multiple styles. August, if you could do one more follow-up on that, can you tell me like why non-realistic eyes are difficult for you? So you can just type that real fast and I'll give you some thoughts while you're typing. I think if these were a challenge, I think I'm reading that correctly when you're saying the non-realistics, like stylized is difficult, which I recall from your previous work. I think you did a lot of like nice realism stuff. I think overall, again, this is a really, really nice set of eyes. Seeing so many good moves. They're very expressive. This is a very minor note, like I gave to Benson, which would be, I like that you're including those eyebrows. I'd even go a little bit, just a touch like larger for their shape. And that's not so much even that thing I mentioned with Benson about like matching. It's just kind of like anatomy. Like I think anatomically it'd be nice to see these get a little bit larger. If I remember too in the, I might even put this one of your eyes as like a little reminder in the master study. I'll give a quick discussion about like eyebrow, like how to think about that or how to plot it on there. Um, gosh, really good again, just good digital moves, good workflow. Um, Probably the more interesting move that August puts into this piece or like tries to pull off is this little bit of this word again, this gradient, kind of like this little fade of gray alongside all this really sharp work. I think because you kept it into the white of the eye, I'm a fan. I like that. Normally that'd be a move that I'd be a little bit skeptical of, because it doesn't like it's like a really big break in style, but I like it. I think it works since you kept it to just the white of the eye. Um, yeah, I gotta say again, this one's the slam dunk. I think this is some of my favorite stuff that August is doing that we could all really learn from, which is being very invested in shape. So meaning not doing moves like this, like if this was, example of the skin. August has all this really nice stuff where we're not doing this. We're not kind of like just putting color anywhere. But it's like very defined shape. Or I should say deliberate. Sometimes I get concerned in class that people think that I'm just about like clean work. Like, oh, it has to be like tight or clean, or the line art has to be like perfect and crisp. It couldn't be farther from the truth. Like I pick this stuff like this guy because I like all this stuff down here, like how it's really rough and has like a lot of different tooth or grit. So deliberate's the better word. Like this is not deliberate on the left, but what August is doing is very deliberate. And what you realize later in art is that shape is the most powerful thing in art. It's the top of the pyramid or whatever in art. It's why we can just throw down, these random shapes, these 6 random shapes, and it looks like a face. It's because shape is actually the top of what we care about in art. For those of you that, I'll talk about this another day if you can ask me in teams. But top of the pyramid, mean like the most important thing. I don't like pyramids because sometimes the bottom looks bigger. Let's just do 1 through 3. So most important things in art, shape. Shape is everything. Value, which is actually like the light and dark, right? And then color. The idea being that if you had, I've drawn on this one a little bit, but I'll show you. If you have good shape and good value, this could be any color and it still works, as you can see with August's piece on the top. You can like change this to any color combination, even like here with green, and it still looks like an eye and it translates, right? And it's because it met those first 2 criteria. It's got good shape, it's got good value. And so that's a good thing to think about with trying to pull this work off. August says, I like drawing realistic eyes, but those don't go well when I try to add them to a face. So I'm practicing different ways to do stylized eyes. That's great. Yeah. And we'll actually see in upcoming assignments how we'll start to put this stuff together onto a face. This is really great work. Again, I think the eyebrow thing is one of the only things I'd point out for now. Love the eyelashes and everything. And yeah, thank you for challenging yourself, truly, like doing something that you're a little bit uncomfortable with. Really nice stuff. Okay, so we have a few more people to go. Let's go to Jalen, who I believe I saw in the room right now. Jalen's here, right? Oh yeah, I see Jalen. Cool. Yeah. Now, funny enough, we would argue, or like we would say that like Benson, August, like these very rendered, colorful eyes. Jalen, I want to point out, like this is what I like to see a lot too, which is just clear, readable, and of course, like checks all the boxes, especially in terms of our workflow. Like I see the layers, I see the inking, I see the color. I like that the color even has like a little bit of tone or like shade where it's kind of like getting a little bit of texture. And so Jalen, why don't you tell us a little bit about the homework in terms of like, did you find it challenging? What was something that was kind of hard to pull off? Like, how was your experience overall?
Usually my other eye that I did, it only took me about 20 to 30 minutes, but these ones took me like another 20 to 30 minutes to finish. I was
Hmm.
having a hard time to like get the shapes and everything.
Yeah. Do you think like the correct kind of like line or shape is harder? Do you have a hard time like moving around the program? Like you see how I'm kind of like flying around the program all the time. Like, is it kind of hard to also like pick a brush or an eraser? Like how do you deal with all that part?
Uh, I sometimes if I so I pick a brush and if I don't like the brush, I just pick a different one. But I just zoom in and then I start coloring if I don't like it. If I like, want to see what it looks like, I zoom back out, see like what it is, and if I still don't like it, I erase it and then start over.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I like hearing that, by the way. I like knowing that people like you are kind of like reviewing or sort of like seeing like, does this work? Does this not work? I mean, again, as you see, when I'm even just like painting or critiquing, I'm flying around the program and we do that a lot with the program, right? We're just kind of like interacting with it. I think my favorite one on here, it's kind of funny because it's like one of the smaller ones, but I really like this one on the top. I think it has a very clear kind of like shape and emotion in it. It's like sort of serious, which I think is cool to pull off. And you also did this thing I talked a little bit about kind of cutting the top off to make the eye feel like neutral or kind of have a little bit of emotion. So I like that a lot. I also love that I can tell you really listen to the lecture about the lighter part of the eye being usually in the bottom half. I think that's great. And then I love this too. I love these nice, like strong shapes for the eyelash. So I think there's a lot of positives going on here. And honestly, the only thing I'd bring up for now would be that depending on the brush that you're using, which I like this one that's very solid, I'd actually keep it up using this one. It'd be cool if you had a brush or even if you made it smaller to in the future ones, like to start thinking about like the line weight. So line weight is usually it's how thick the line is, right? So it could be this thick, it could be this thin, it could be really thin. We even say this with text, like when you type, right? That it has like a font weight. It's like bigger or smaller. So line weight is usually how thick something is. And the good news with Jalen's piece is that it has this nice, like bold line weight. Like we can see the shapes, they're very clear. The next stages of this would be if you, whether it's with a different brush or even with the same brush and just making it smaller at times, if you were to do things like this, where the line that you're drawing, like even just one line, has different weight. So what that means is like, well, what if it was like a little bit thinner going out, a little bit thicker on the inside? In artwork, we call this like line quality, right? Like what's the quality of the line? And the reason I bring it up is because you can take work like this that's very bold. It's like very, again, direct. And right away, you can add a lot of interest to it visually by giving it, a little bit of different line weight. Even like you did that nice part down here. I love this decision right here on the bottom. So, maybe even do that here, like your pupil. I was going to tell you with those reflections, like you could have one that's like really sharp potentially, right? You could do like a sharp reflection versus like this softer highlight. So I think a good thing to think about moving forward is I really like your drawings and the color and everything. Like keep that up. And then what you'll be talked about with week to week potentially will be like, oh, I wonder like what's the variety in your work? Like what's the variety in the lines? Like here's a great example, right? You did this nice thick line, you have like a thinner one down here, you have an even thinner one. That's why I was really gravitating towards this one because I thought, oh, this one has like a lot of nice variety. It's very interesting. It creates like a lot of interest. And so I think that'd be a good word for you, Jalen, and like your next pieces besides like practicing the information, like whatever it is we're drawing. A cool thing for you to be like, oh, how do I always put like a little bit of variety? You're definitely doing it. You have different lines, you have like different shapes, right? So this is more like it's not something you're not doing, it's more encouragement. Like, yeah, keep going. Keep pushing more of that little variety in there. I like it a lot. And you'd be surprised again for people that potentially have this like very complex work, like let's say Benson's to start, that this work is also just as challenging when it's simple and it's really effective when it's simple. Sometimes I talk about like Pixar concept art and stuff like that, right? That's like very simple and readable. And I could picture you kind of being in that range with your style right now. Very nice stuff. Okay, let's go to Nolan, who of course I saw earlier. Um, First of all, really high effort. I like all the pairs of eyes, some interesting styles, and then even like placing them into a head, right? Showing us a little bit of a design. So I think we're seeing a lot of good experimentation here. I mean, like a lot of good moves, a lot of good techniques. Nolan is someone who, in my opinion, I think you really skyrocketed from some of the stuff you did in the first term with your eye assignment. What was like your current challenge? What were you trying to do?
On the eye assignment.
Yeah.
So when you were like giving out options to what we could do, I was like, okay, I could do either one of them or I could do all of them.
Yeah.
So I decided to do all of them.
Very good.
Yeah,
Very good.
and like previously on the like last semester, I did 4 eyes, And here you see I did 4 sets of eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also tried to follow it up with what I learned from last semester.
Yeah, even with like I could see that with some of the like skin tones, I see like the purple shadow. Nolan, actually, I like your first assignment. Do you mind if I put it on the screen real quick? Like your older eye assignment? Can I put it on
Go
screen?
ahead.
Yeah, I think it's very cool. It's not common that we get to see it before and after a little bit, or like two versions. Here, I'll leave it big for a minute. So yeah, this is Nolan's first eye assignment. And I like what you said. This to me was like a really good answering to the prompt, the very first assignment. It's like you did exactly what the prompt said. And now you went that step further. You did something that's very much like me, like a move I would make where you said like, oh, I heard all the things you could do, so I want to do all of them. I love that kind of engine. I mean, like I love that drive. Um, so yeah, I think that's what I see. I see you like really showing off a lot of the stuff that you learned in the previous class, which I like. Really like this one. I think this is one of my favorite ones because it's extremely innovative. And I see this in your work from us working for the last semester that
Mhm.
you're technically doing very well. Like your technical abilities very well. And I'm starting to see more of like your character and like your style and like kind of what you like, things that you trend towards. And that excites me as a teacher because it's like, oh, cool. Now I see this very good student like who's doing good work. Now I get to see more of his personality like coming, through this work. And I really like what I see right here. Um, Sets of eyes look nice. Yeah, again, I'm liking this stuff overall. Um, you're actually going to get a little bit of that nice like tiny nitpick stuff that I was bringing up with some other people about. Maybe watch sometimes like that symmetry thing I mentioned, where it's like kind of
Mhm.
the same length or same width. So in this piece in particular, what I would say is, I would like if it was like my piece, or if we were doing like a little bit of art direction, like I would maybe even go a little bit like more narrow on the bag, especially for that lower lid.
Okay.
'Cause oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'm listening.
Oh yeah. So that's some nice like support of this good movie you already did right here. Like larger eyelid, a little bit larger shape here. Then you go a little bit like narrower, more small down here. Um so I think like, that's one. This has a little bit of 3/4, which I like a lot. It's like just barely like turned a little bit because I can see how you did that more narrow side on the far side. Um
Yeah.
Funny enough, I'll tell you this real fast because we're working more together, so I feel like I can get more honest, more direct with you. I like this one personally, and I'll tell you, I think this one is technically the best one. I mean, like the decision making and kind of like the color choice and everything. This one on the right is very fun to me, and then this one I think is very like perfect in terms of like all your moves work really well together. I especially like this little kind of stepping, which I want to point that word out, stepped kind of color where it's
Yeah.
sort of like fades with like a lot of sharp edge versus soft. Um, do you have any questions about this work? Like anything that you'd like help with directly?
Uh, mm, no, except are you looking forward to what I can do in the future?
Awesome. Yeah, I like that comment. Very good. I'll Let's talk on Teams if you want to like ping me or just remind me on Teams like, hey, you mentioned this, but if you want to, I'll give you a little bit more stuff like some minor stuff on the face, like putting it together and some decisions with like the eyebrows. Um,
Yeah.
but I know we have to move on with critique, so you let me know. But I love the face overall. Like I think it's good. It's actually got just a nice like design, like nice clear design to it. But yeah, definitely ping me if you want some more stuff. I'd love to talk more about it.
Okay.
Very nice. Good stuff. Okay, we got our final two, and then we will look at our little master artwork together. I want to point out, as I said in the chat area, I love all the commentary and a little bit of chatting about the work. I really appreciate that. I think it's cool. Um, okay, so let's go to Genesis, which I got a huge amount in a cool way of images from Genesis, including the artwork, some of the reference pictures. I wanted to make sure the artwork is really featured on the page, but I did screenshot like all the nice little steps that Genesis shared with me. And so it looks like we have two kind of Disney inspired eyes, like from actual character. And then I feel like this was the one you had sent me on Teams. Was this one from a reference, or is it like a little bit more made up Genesis?
Yeah, I just kind of drew that in the middle of class.
Okay, cool. So that was more of like a designed one from yourself, kind of like a made up one.
Yeah.
You know, a really cool question for you would be, when you do it on your own versus like kind of using a reference, what do you feel like is different? Like what do you change, or what do you kind of like notice when you're looking at a picture?
I think I change the shape if I have a reference photo, instead of just like doing some generic shape, maybe.
I like that comment a lot, because I think a thing that's cool to notice is that, remember in the chat before I talked a little bit about this like almond shape, where it's, I called it kind of like the next stage, where I'm like, hey, that's cool. Like we don't just use a circle. Now we make kind of like an almond or a football. And then you're right. When you look at the picture, that's where you get into this nice thing where you're like a little bit more asymmetrical, as we'd say. Like it's a little bit more different from top to bottom shape. And that gives it more like character and more like unique quality as an eye. Um, I think overall, this is the one I really like a lot. It kind of like checks all those boxes we talked about with drawing, and even like I talked about with people earlier, it's got like some nice variety. I even really like this sort of like pin, kind of like a super small highlight with like the nice big warm pupil, which is very popular in this kind of Disney work. If you had to really break it down technically, you would talk a lot about how the ratio of that pupil is so large, versus even like the one that you made up. And then I think it was, yeah, August. Notice how August has this extremely like small pupil, which is more cold, meaning like that's like a colder, like even like a villain, it could go that far, etc. Like it gets like colder and more removed emotionally, as a character design. And then the Disney, excuse me, the Disney stuff has these like big pupils and big eyes, so then they feel warmer. They're like more inviting. I think what's cool too is that this one that you create is kind of like in between. It's actually like a pretty big eye inside there, but then you were like a little bit smaller. So this could be someone that's like a little more in between. Like I wonder if this character is like, good or bad, or like which one they lean towards. But I like you trying out all these different styles. Um, I think there's a lot of encouraging stuff for sure going on. In particular, even this idea where you like did that nice little tail. I think that's a really good shape. You did the same thing over here with eyelash. You might remember from Benson's piece, I was just talking about like weight, like giving, one side of the eye a little bit more weight and one side of the eye is a little bit less weight. Um, if you can remember that, because I know it's a lot to juggle, that's like a great move that you'd want to hang on to, is like this thing again, going back to variety, right? Like, how do I make the top or bottom different? How do I give more weight or less weight to one side or the other? And then if I were you, like you did, I would definitely, whether it's our assignments or just in your own time, like always study stuff like this, right? Like always draw these little things. That's why we're literally about to do this in a second. You constantly want to look at stuff that you like and then practice it, like make versions of it, right? Um, but yeah, I think other than that, let me see something real fast. This is we're gonna talk a lot more about this later, like about color and like how vibrant it is. But I will encourage you on this brown one, that this like kind of highlighted area, if you want, it could be like a little bit, just a touch more vibrant is the word we'd use. Something like just a little bit more. I don't want to throw these words out yet because they come a little bit later in class, but it's what's called saturation, which just means like how vivid it is. Like if you imagine, an apple or an orange, like a piece of fruit, is very bright, right? And then the trunk of a tree, like that brown, is actually kind of like gray or kind of like dull in real life. And so you could, again, like here's before and after on that part, it could be a little bit more vibrant if you want, especially because it draws more attention to the eye, right? But we'll get into stuff like that later. I think this is a great submission. I can tell you're very engaged with the material from this submission, and so please keep that focus up, because I'll definitely push you a lot and help you with the technical side of things, the drawing side of things, and then yeah, even some of the storytelling with like these choices you make. Very nice stuff. Very good submission. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Genesis. All right. Last but certainly not least, we have Zaya's piece. Oh, there's Zaya. Okay, cool. I see. So yeah, Zaya, again, I actually right away opened this up and had some thoughts about Ramon's work, because I was like, oh, this looks very in line with that. Let's start with a question that's interesting for you, because I'm kind of drawing that comparison. like, what do you think are the similarities? Like, why do you think I'm saying that? What style wise or decision wise is similar?
So I personally think there is something in the shading, first of all, because it's a lot rougher, and like, you know, even this for me is very clean, and I had a like this was very challenging because I like to make everything very kind of sketchy, and usually I have a style even closer to those sort of, you know, pieces like I always forget his name,
Oh,
the other
Ramon.
artist.
Yeah, Ramon.
Yeah, Ramon. And so I feel like it's very simple, and that we focus more on the line art and the shape instead of colors, really.
Yeah, very good.
Does that
There's
make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I talk about this like probably some week randomly, but there's a lot of artwork that kind of is either drawing centric or painting centric, right? And that's
Yeah.
not just the difference between like a sketch or a painting. It means as you're saying, the drawing is like the most important part of this piece.
Yeah.
If the drawing was weaker, the piece would fall apart. And then weirdly, some other pieces, I'd actually, just to bring up one more time, I'd say like the Splatoon piece as an example. That's like a great drawing. I mean, like Benson's drawing and then like the actual style of it, but it's a lot more about like color and size and stuff. It's not really like the drawing that sells it. It's more like the choice of color and the scale. So yeah, these kinds of artists, to use like a phrasing, they kind of like live and die by drawing. Drawing is like the most important thing. It kind of like really holds the piece together. Um, and I agree with you that like your style right off the bat, because we haven't worked together yet. Your style is, or we haven't worked together a lot. It's like a little bit like rough. This is clean. I think this is a good place to be. What you'll find when you do rougher work, which I do as well, to be honest, is you have to like sometimes go back and forth because your rough work will have foundational issues, let's say, and you got to go and do clean work or even like practice clean to improve it, right? You kind of like bounce back and forth, and I think we'll see that potentially in your work a little bit. But yeah, the one thing I want to point out that they really share is that your work in this is extremely angular, right? It has like a lot of cut.
I
So
love shapes. You don't get it. I put them
say it again.
everywhere.
What
I
was that?
love shapes.
Yeah.
I put them in everything, especially
Yeah.
in the hair.
You have to. There again, I think
Yeah.
too many people, this is a little bit of bias, like too many people are very like gentle and soft about shape, and that's why the work looks muddy. And so you want to be like really definite about shape. And so if you're doing this, like you're kind of like tucking in these little shapes, you're like breaking this, you're literally cutting. So meaning like instead of this eye just being like round, it has like a cut in it. You should definitely do that. It's again a little bit more like later on, or even just like a personal comment, but you'll see that like people are obsessed with that in art, as they should be, especially in character. They're obsessed with like cut and angle and like how things work. In that regard, I'll show you something super fast, really quick. If I can find it really quick. I have so much stuff on my computer. So while this loads up, yeah, so this work again is very good. Like I already see a lot of potential. I love like all the coloring and everything as well. And what I think you're going to be pushed on, honestly, is probably when you show me that rougher work, we have to kind of figure out like, does it work or not? Is it like, it's so weird to determine like why does this like scratchy and like clunky stuff in this slide work and other people's doesn't, right? Like, what is it about this casual style, or it looks casual, that works? And I think we'll pick up on that with you as well. Overall, I think it works. I think what I'm seeing works really well. Here, so I'll show you this real fast. So this was someone that I learned from, like one of my teachers, and the idea again about like cut and angle is just that everything, like every little angle, every little shape, all the stuff in here, the perspective of it, etc. Even on this like hard surface, meaning this like kind of geometric character, it's like everything is intentional. There's no accidents about like shape and angle and cut. And so what you see in like higher levels of character design is that you become obsessed about that kind of cut and angle. So to wrap up the critique and of course give some actual feedback on this. I think this one is the one that works the best, in my opinion, for like the angle, the style. I think the skin tone could be like just a little bit more desaturated, because
Yeah.
things like this concern me. I'll show you real quick. It's like a little bit deep in value, which again is good. Like it can be obviously anything at once, but it kind of has like a vibrancy that I would tone down just a little bit,
Mhm.
to show you that actual color. It's like if you did something like this, I would keep it just as deep. I would just slightly like move it over here. So maybe more
Yeah.
like that. Um,
Mhm.
just for the sake of like even like supporting that eye color. You did that like nice green. And again, like 9 times out of 10, we want that to be the focus. We want that to pop a lot. But yeah, I think that one works the best. I'm honestly, again, very excited by a lot of these pieces and what's going on. I think some final just quick stuff would be when you do like that scar. I would actually potentially color that line art a little bit more like the scar. So it reads less of like the black line art and almost like it's too aggressive in information right there. Like this gets pretty chaotic in information. So you should consider that line art just being like a deep brown or deep red. So it kind of blends with the skin more,
Yeah, I started trying that out recently. Honestly, I hated colors for like 3 months. I haven't used them in so long. So I was
Yeah.
kind of debating trying them. And I was like, man, maybe not the best idea. So
Yeah,
now I
try it out.
regret
I
it.
mean, yeah, it's like one of our literal opening lessons is about clipping, which means like when you clip to the layer and like you color lines, or if you want to do what's called an alpha lock. So yeah, you should definitely consider some stuff like that. Yeah, last little thing is I love this decision a lot, like the little like almost like dot or like makeup. Keep being very like kind of artsy or like creative like that, truly. Artsy is kind of like patronizing. I don't like that term, but yeah, like do weird stuff. Do weird stuff in class. Try little designs like that. That way we can like kind of see if it works or not. Does it click or not? Um, it's great work. It's really nice stuff. I'm very excited to see what you do, especially when we get to some of that character design stuff later. Um, and yeah, I think final idea overall, speaking of, is you're right. Like the color works like pretty well. Some of it's like a little bit gray, truly. Like me, like these choices kind of like blend too much. So you'd kind of like slide some of that value or saturation around. Here's like again with the one we're about to look at as like an example. You can see how there's like different skin tones, but those eyes pop a lot more. There's like more contrast going on. But we'll get into that formally again in the coming lessons about color and stuff. I'm very excited to have you in class. This is nice stuff, and I'm glad that you're bringing this kind of like style into our work as well. Very cool. Okay, so perfect timing. We have about 10 minutes before we gotta duck out of here. Thanks so much for everyone who submitted. That was great critique. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at this work, and we want to do two things. We want to talk a little bit about it, but more importantly, we'll do some drawing. In fact, I'll kind of do both. I'll kind of be drawing while you're talking about it. And so what I want you to do is in the chat, you can say it out loud, but I like the chat a lot because we can kind of see the string of everyone talking. What I want to hear is like, here's this work, and it got buried in the chat because everyone's saying cool stuff. So I'm going to put it in there one more time. I love all the commentary today from everyone. So, okay, here we go. Okay, so in the chat one more time, here is this image. So if you want to pull it up, of course, and see a little bit closer. And type in the chat, we want to ask you some quick questions. We want to say, what do you like, if anything? And you don't have to. I think what's important about not liking work is being constructive. So like if you like the work, of course, you'd say, I like it because of this. And if you don't like it, be constructive. Like, what artistically do you not like about it? Like what objectively, not emotionally. Don't be like, oh, I just hate it, or I don't like stuff like this. Like be objective. Like, is it the line quality? Is it the color choice? Is it like the proportioning? So yeah, you can say, what do you like or not like? That's also fine. What I'm also really interested in hearing you talk about is what is different. I'm going to abbreviate this so I get quicker. What's different from our homework? If you don't have it open, I'll just leave it here on the screen for a second so you see. So what is different about this kind of like approach to like drawing eyes and even like the shapes and everything? What is it different from like the homework or what we talked about in class? And so while you type that and put some answers in the chat, I'll do a little bit of drawing and discussion. So the reason that I wanted to show this work is because it does present something that I think I even wrote on Zaya's little slide, kind of like an interesting style choice in terms of like the drawing, which is something we'd call kind of like a rough queen style. So what that means is when we look at this, this is actually, I'm saying this in like a funny way, it's actually got like a lot of weird decisions. You know, it's got like, you know, an eyelash that's a string. It's got one that looks like a little swirl or something. So it has these very like impulsive, like fast decisions. And what's interesting is that this is very hard to pull off. So it's hard to do it and have it not look amateur. But the way that you pull it off is that you have very good volume. And of course, even the color helps a lot. So what we mean by volume is that even though these pieces have this like quality that's sort of wild looking, impulsive, like scratchy, a little bit toothy, if you do things like this and you flip them, they hold up well. Like they look basically the same one way or the other. And what that means is that they have extremely strong volume. They have very good drawing ability or drawing foundation in them. So that's what we will talk a lot about for those of you that like to do stuff like this that's like a little bit rougher. Is there's people professionally, their entire career is based on having quite rough work, right? But you got to nail the actual like drawing and the volume itself, including, we'll even say on here, it has very good anatomy, right? Now, another thing about this style, like a good word that we want to learn today, I'm gonna look at the chat real fast because we got some nice stuff going. So Zaya says, I love the weird shape language. Yeah, I like that. Doesn't follow stereotypical art styles. It's not like fully rendered or all clean. Ramon's more experimental with colors and his choices fit the characters. Yeah, that's great commentary. We had mentioned earlier, especially because this work has some lighting in it, that again, if the shape and the value work, it could be any color, you know? This is like extreme. We'd be like, oh, like he's not trying to draw someone who's green, but it's interesting, right? That it still works. It's still like a face that's green and has purple hair now and etc. And that's because those first two parts work so well. And then Nolan says, I like everything about the line work, color combinations, and the shapes. That's cool. Jessica says, I like the rough look with lots of details. Some people would say it looks messy, but I love that. That's a really nice thing. Genesis is almost like a style. It's like, oh, it's rough, but it has like a lot of supporting details. Like it's not like simple and rough. It's almost like complex and rough, right? Benson says, I love the expressions. They show so much character. Zaya says, second up, the face and the shape language is very powerful. I like how the eye on the I like that term. The eye on the top kind of boops out and hangs out of the orbit. Yeah, very good. So it's kind of like breaking that socket a little bit. Yeah, Nolan says I love messy artwork. Yeah. So I want to follow up on that last one. So you rightfully can say this. Like this is very justified for all of you to say like, oh, it's rough, it's messy. I really like that. And some more technical terms, especially for your brushes, like how do you like draw this stuff, right? Some more technical terms, a really important one would be tooth. That this work does have like a lot of tooth in it. And tooth is usually the term we would use for stuff like this, where it's got like a little bit of texture to it. So we can actually see it's kind of hard if you have it on your end, it's easier to see. You can see that there's like kind of almost like a paper, like grit texture in the skin itself. Of course, there's like all this like scratching and chaos, which creates a lot of that tooth. Benson says rough styles always have so much personality. Yeah, and then another word, because again, that's great, is that personality. I love this. It has personality. We're saying that, right? What we're also saying out loud is that it has a lot of information and character. I think I did that right. It has a lot of information and character. So what that means is part of what makes this so energetic is it literally has like energy in that line, right? So instead of being, you know, an eye that is like this, like almost like perfectly circular, kind of like perfectly clean, it instead has all this extra energy. So moving forward, again, with this kind of work, this is all great commentary. Everyone's responding to like the grit, the tooth, the messiness, the personality, the character of it. There's obviously some stuff about the perspective. Oh, I want to read LJ because LJ typed one real fast. LJ says, I really love the work. I'm obsessed with the sketchy looking, messy, clean line art. Another very good term. Yeah, kind of like sketchy. I really like how the lips have the gradient coloring. And even though they don't have like a sharp outline, you can still tell what they are as well as with the blush. Yeah, one of the profound things about that, LJ, is that lips are actually quite soft. They're like a very soft material. And so the soft texture, they actually shouldn't have a lot of very strong line art. Even just that little gradient is nice. Zaya says, Ramon's also mixing the use of the airbrush and hard shading very nicely. Super nice contrast. Yeah, a good way to look at that would be that if we had to, again, put this into terms, that the parts that are quite sharp, like the sharp kind of lighting or color, so sharp stuff is a lot more about like anatomy. So I mean, like it's about lighting, but it's more about like the eyelid, cast shadow of the nose, corner of the mouth. So it's more about like the identifying of anatomy. And that soft stuff is more about texture and temperature. Right? It's like, let me pull that airbrush out only when I'm trying to create the temperature of something. I'm trying to make something blush. I'm trying to make something warm. You can even see like when I talked about the line quality that this is crazy looking for the shadow, right? It's basically like a strong brush with no gradient, just like these big aggressive marks, right? It's another thing we can think about is the mark making. So this is a lot of great stuff we're hearing people talk about. We definitely want to do this. And then to kind of wrap it up for artistically, like something you could take with this moving forward. Here's a couple of things that I would point out artistically that you want to use in your work potentially. One would be that we do see a lot of this kind of like, you know, messier quality. But something that is very consistent is that there is a lot of that strong shape for the top of the eyelid. So you see a lot of strong shape, a lot of thinner quality for the bottom. So we'd say, you know, what's consistent? Like what are things we saw even in our own work? Very strong top. We'll even put top on there. We actually saw this in Zaya's work that we don't always need perfect circles, right? We can have things that have a little bit of cut. So cut means that instead of being like a perfect smooth circle, there's actually a break in this piece, right? And then one of the final things we got to get out of here is check this work out, click on it, and what you'll see is that there's absolutely no white in the white of the eye. So this part right here is pure white. But the white of the eye right there, especially in these down here, has a lot of tone and color in it. And I would really like moving forward when you draw eyes, when you think about them, that you play with that. You play with that idea that there's not always going to be distinct color, or excuse me, there's going to be a white in the eye, but there's actually a little bit of that nice kind of warm color to the eye. We got to get out of here. I want to see how fast notes. I like the line quality because I like line quality that's very obvious because it looks better. I like that, by the way, obvious. I think if I'm hearing that correctly, it's kind of like it has like very distinct character. There's like thick lines, thin lines, you know, all of the above, a variety between. So yeah, it's very distinct. Last little thing I'll tell you real fast, a move that I took from this work. I know we got to go. You look at this work because you want to borrow or take these moves. Like you want to take the philosophy. That's like what we do right now is we come up with like philosophy and ideas from the work. We don't just like copy the eyeball or copy the nose. We want like the theory that we want to copy. And one thing that I see a lot of people do, I barely see it on here, but that I like a lot, just so you can see, is sometimes when I do those bright highlights, I actually like to give it a little bit of outline, like a little bit. Let me do it on top here. Just like a little bit of emphasis with like a black or even like a color. And you see that a lot. And this goes back to something that Zaya pointed out, which is that there's a mix of airbrush and there's a mix of hard shapes. There's parts that are very like soft in color even, and then there's parts that are extremely aggressive. And that contrast is what makes interest. So we'll talk a lot like this. We'll try to do this as much as we can during critiques. We'll look at someone else's work to get some decision, some theory, and of course, get a lot of great participation from everyone. Just know that if you're typing and you're talking about the work, it's definitely noted, including versus people who are not typing and not looking at the work. That reflects a lot on that effort grade. So great stuff, great commentary. I'll actually put the notes thing into the Teams chat that we just wrote up so you can see that as well. We'll start a new assignment, of course, on Friday. And my schedule's weird now. So today's Tuesday, Friday, we'll start our next lesson. If you haven't turned in that homework, jump on that, get started, start this semester strong. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day. Have fun with whatever you're doing today. I'll see you guys on Friday. Take care. See ya.